Hello and welcome to Reboot. This is City of Sydney event series. I'm Rebecca Campbell from Zambezi.com and I'll be facilitating today. So first of all, before we start, I want to acknowledge the Gadigal people, the traditional owners of the land in which most of us are meeting on today, and their elders past and present. Also, because we're all online and we're in different places, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which all of us are meeting on, and the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people who are attending the event today. For those of you who haven't attended a Reboot event before, this is the final of a group of 6 that we've been running. The City of Sydney put the events on in response to a business needs survey that went out in the height of the pandemic, looking at what business owners needed at this time. So we are going to share in chat a link to the videos of the other 5 programs that we have run so far. We had amazing events with Tim Doyle from Koala and Pilot on digital marketing. We had Andre who's the founder of Vino Mofo, on branding. We had Fleur from TEDx Sydney on personal brand. And last week we had Chris, one of the founders of Pedestrian, on content marketing strategy. So if you'd like to check out any of those events, please check out the videos following the link. So starting next February, there will be another 6 events. They will be focused on growth strategy, people, finance, and culture. And so I'll tell you about the first 2 events at the end of the webinar today and how you'll be able to register for them. Every event is following a similar format, which is what we'll be following today. So in a moment, I'll introduce Anna. Anna will speak for 20 minutes. We will then go to 3 case study businesses who are real businesses from the City of Sydney who will ask Anna questions. So we have an e-commerce business, we have a physical retail store, and we have a tech startup. All very different questions of how you can apply what Anna will be talking about today. Last time I checked, we had 805 Sydney businesses registered to attend today. So it is incredible. We thought we might have, we registered for 500 on Zoom and we sold out a week ago. So the City of Sydney very kindly extended the Zoom license so we can have up to 1,000 attendees. So even though we can't see each other in person, it's wonderful to know that the whole Sydney, 805 Sydney businesses are connected at this one event today. A few of you wrote to me this morning and told me what you wanted to get out of the event, and I just want to share so you get a sense of who else is attending right now. So we have Anna Chatburn from Azure Pure Skincare. She's looking for ideas to boost awareness and sales in the lead up to Christmas. We have Minji Shi from Minji Does Design at Eastwood. She wants to learn how to systematically identify people who are coming to a website who are likely to convert to paid customers. We have Alison Nolan, who is from the Longshore Drift in Edgecliff. She is looking to encourage referrals in the drive up to Christmas. Marguerite from Build It's Australia. So she has attended every single event in our series so far, so thank you. She has a unique STEM construction toy, and she's got lots of people visiting her website. She wants to learn how to get better conversions. Barman from Culture Quest Tours is about to go into virtual experiences, which is new for them. And wants to learn kind of tactics to launch and grow that business. Natalie Getz from Violet and Gold. They are Australian native botanical creative food company. She wants to learn how to make a video go viral. Camilla Hirth from I Am Diversity, and Lee from Pedal Set Go, which is a bicycle education company in Newtown. They want to learn frameworks that high growth companies use and how they can apply to them. And we also got many more. Anna has read the pre-registration surveys that many of you filled out, so thank you for doing that. I'm now going to hand to Anna for a presentation. Anna is an incredible entrepreneur and leader of growth. I saw Anna speak when she had just launched Spaceship, which is a superannuation fund. She launched an incredible viral campaign, which led to that business having 100 million in revenue almost instantly on launch, 100 million under management, instantly on launch. She's now head of growth at Brighte, and I'll hand to Anna for your presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Rebecca. So thanks for the intro. I will be referring to Spaceship quite often in this talk, so it's good to sort of get an understanding of what I'm talking about. So when I started off in Spaceship, I was their 3rd employee. So I joined when we had no customers. We were literally 2 tables at the back of Tyro FinTech Hub. We also had, no customers, no product in market, and we just had, $1.6 million in funding to get us started. And that was sort of like where my journey with Spaceship started off. So back then we were just a superannuation fund, and the idea of Spaceship was, for people like me who have 30 to 40 years until we retire, it doesn't really make sense why I'm invested in, extremely low risk stocks. So for me, I was invested in a fund that invested in the ASX 200, which meant that around 60% of my portfolio was made up of, your mining companies, your, big four banks, and also a lot in property. Whereas, if I'm looking, 30 to 40 years in the future, do I think that's what's going to be fueling most of the growth in the economy? And if not, then why would I be invested in those businesses? So the idea of Spaceship was to help the millennials invest in the future, which from our perspective was companies like, Facebook, your Googles, and your Amazons and so forth. So it was a super fund that invested in technology companies. Cool. So today, my talk will be about an introduction into growth marketing. So that's just an understanding of what's the difference between growth marketing and how does it differ from traditional marketing. How do you understand your customers? So how can you tailor a campaign that really sort of touches on to the jobs to be done of your customers, as well as the fun part, which everyone I think enjoys the most, which is, how do you get more customers? What are some customer acquisition strategies that I can run for my business, depending on what my business model is? Cool. So I'll start with the first part of my question, which is, what is the difference between traditional marketing and growth marketing? So I've come to realize this question is really controversial with a lot of people. So they like to debate a lot over the semantics. I don't worry too much about that. You can call it whatever you want, whether it's growth hacking, quantitative marketing, full stack marketing, technical marketing, anything you want. I think moving from marketing to growth, in my opinion, is not just about the terminology or even the tactics that you use. It's about a change in your mentality and the way you approach building processes and teams to grow a technology company or product. So let's take a look at this traditional funnel, which is basically what I learned in marketing in university. So traditional marketing has typically focused on the first two layers, awareness and acquisition. So this is particularly apparent when you look at how marketing teams are structured and the goals they operate against. So marketing teams tend to focus on KPIs that align with the top two layers of the funnels, so your leads, signups, new users, and downloads, for example. And if you were to draw this out on a graph, no matter how you draw it, it's always going to be an increasing graph. You're never going to have negative leads. You're never going to have negative signups, negative new users or downloads. It rarely ever goes down. So this doesn't actually tell you too much about how your business is going. So marketing teams are optimized for pursuing those type of KPIs. And you'll notice that the majority of the team members tend to have marketing backgrounds in content, paid acquisition, copywriting, and so forth. I think what's not included in this is worth noting. So you don't have your engineers, you don't have your designers, you don't have your product managers and data scientists. And you'll notice that those roles tend to be completely in different silos. So you might notice that, other teams within the organization own the rest of the funnel beyond awareness and acquisition. So for example, you might notice your product team might own activation and retention, your sales team might own revenue. And, every organization is structured differently, but what the key point is that most of the layers of the funnel are owned by completely separate teams in completely separate silos. Now let's compare this with the growth funnel. So growth marketers look at the funnel in a much more holistic way. So this is because KPIs are tied to growth rates of metrics that tell a much more complete picture of the business. So leads, registrations, and new users are just one of the many inputs to the growth rate. So the growth rate can be affected by influencing any layer of the funnel. So and the goal is generally to figure out how these layers interact with each other so you can figure out where the drop-off points are. And it's a little bit corny, but I say it's so that you can turn your funnel into a tunnel. And this is through using what we call pirate metrics. And it's called pirate metrics because the first, couple letters of each word spell out R, like a pirate. And so as a result, you'll notice that the goals that these growth teams pursue are very different to marketing teams. So at a high level, the goal is always on the growth rate, but at any given time, the growth team can be focusing on influencing any part of that funnel because they all ultimately influence the growth rate. And if you were to draw this out and the metrics that they're looking at on a graph, it's not just always going to be going up. Like it's quite, you'll be looking at, what's my month-on-month increase in users, month-on-month increase in downloads, and you'll notice that, maybe some months it'll go down. So for example, if you were selling Christmas tree decorations, you might notice that in December it goes up. So you're able to sort of track seasonality a lot more, and you might notice, oh, there's a sudden drop on, one day. Like, why is this the case? What happened? Maybe something's gone down, like the website's gone down and you're not making as many sales. But in this case, you're able to see, over time, am I actually growing as a business or am I like declining as a business and I need to work on something? Or you can even spot like small, like short-term trends, like, you know, your website's gone down or something's gone wrong, which is why people aren't converting as quickly. So I think it's a much more holistic view of how business is run. So to influence the middle and bottom part of the funnel, there always needs to be a greater focus on engineering, design, and data. So I work really closely with my engineering and design team. And I guess that's why these resources are so tightly integrated on growth teams. And I can't put an emphasis enough on this point. In organizations, when engineering is completely separate, technology tasks to support marketing are almost always deprioritized. And I've definitely worked in businesses like that before, where I just had to fight tooth and nail just to get a little bit of some engineer's time. And I think for a lot of people, this is a recipe for failure going forward. So I think growth should live at the intersection of marketing, product, and data. So what I mean by this is you can't just really sprinkle growth on top of a product as an afterthought. Your product should be used as a vehicle for growth, and it should be driven by data. So this brings me to the second part of my talk, which is about understanding your customers and how can you actually get the most out of your marketing dollars by actually, you know, spending a lot of time on segmentation and understanding, you know, what sort of job you're actually solving for your customers. Cool. So I think you really need to prime yourself to think about customers and what are their jobs to be done. So you really need to understand the basics, which is who are your people. So what are their background and demographics, like age range, or if you're in e-commerce and selling to a specific gender, then gender as well. But also what are their goals and challenges and what are you helping them solve? So what's the problem we're solving and why? And then also how do users discover and adopt your product? So there's no point, I guess, attaining users that would be, you know, vastly different from the users that you actually, you know, you're actually making sales to, just so that you're not wasting money on marketing dollars to someone who won't convert or who won't turn into, you know, as a retaining user. And I guess when you're thinking about jobs to be done, this is a really important question. So, you know, when it comes to like, what are your competitors? Who are your alternatives? You know, Uber's competitors are not just, you know, your Lyfts or your Olas. Uber's competitors, or at least their alternative solutions, are like, well, you know, if their job to be done is getting someone from A to B and not just becoming a ride-hailing service, then you have a lot more competitors, a lot of different acquisition channels you can think about. So usually when I make a decision as to whether I want to use Uber, I'm usually considering, okay, well, do I want to take public transport? Can I just walk there? You know, like, can I, you know, maybe I will use a different, you know, ride-hailing service, or maybe I should just drive there myself. And I think there are a lot of different problems that could be solved that do get you from point A to point B. I think you need to know what audience you're not focusing on. So for example, I don't want to focus on, you know, people who can get there in 2 minutes walking time. I want to target the people who might have actually gone for public transport or might have caught a taxi. So I think when it comes to that, you need to understand not just, you know, your direct competitors, but also your alternatives and market to them. So potentially instead of, you know, public transport at 2 a.m. in the morning when, you know, they come at every hour, maybe I want a billboard at a train station that says, you know, get there sooner, just catch an Uber instead. So I think you need to really consider all the alternatives and what are the jobs to be done. So this is Adam, the startup guy. So I never asked him for permission to use his photo, but I'm just going to hope he forgives me. But this is sort of what Spaceship's customer persona looks like. So this Adam, the startup guy, he represents 60% of our users. So his demographics or background is that he works in technology and he's around 25 to 35 years old. So you can get these sort of general demographics if you're running Facebook ads or if you're on Google Analytics, like you can generally understand, you know, where, like who they are. And to be honest, like in my first 2 weeks at Spaceship, I actually spent a lot of that time calling up, you know, people who were interested in Spaceship and going through a customer persona survey. I used to just give them a call, offer them a t-shirt if they'd answer my questions, spend 10 minutes on the call just typing up every single word that they'd say. And then when I'd ask them a question, towards the end, I'd start clustering the keywords that they use. So for example, they like the word, you know, innovation a lot. So I'd use those sort of buzzwords in the advertising that I use for Spaceship as well. So I think it's really important to speak to your customers in their own language and not just your own. So a lot of the times when we start a business, we understand our industry a lot and we have a lot of jargon that we use which customers might not use. And for Spaceship, this was particularly a prevalent problem because, you know, we were working in a finance industry. There's so much financial slang, and really millennials and a lot of the ones who don't work in finance just want to understand, you know, what is the concept of investing and how do I make sure I'm making informed financial decisions. So I think a lot of the times you need to be using their own language to appeal to the same audience. So when I asked for like what are their goals and what are they trying to achieve through Spaceship, a lot of them told me, you know, we just wanted to make more informed financial decisions and we want high returns. So this is the sort of stuff I would structure onto the webpage. I think like the most important question to ask is, you know, how would you describe Spaceship to a friend or a colleague? Again, using the same language that they would use to explain Spaceship to a friend. So we sort of wanted to become almost like a pub conversation where they just talk to a friend about Spaceship. So I think using the same language is really important. And then the other parts of the website I just do based on their responses to these questions and the clustering of keywords. So another question I asked is, what don't you currently like about your superannuation fund? He's like, well, you know, I hear from my electricity company a lot more than I hear from my superannuation fund, yet I'm paying, you know, my managers $800 in fees per year. I don't really know, you know, who has my money, what they're doing with it and where it's invested in. And I just want to find out a little bit more about superannuation. Then I'd ask them, you go, okay, well, what, you know, how do you currently discover products or financial products? And, you know, are you open to recommending them to friends? So they said, okay, well, I frequently use social media. I, you know, find out a lot about products from social media, and I'm also open to recommending financial products to friends. So in a survey that I did, I realized that like most people over the age of 40 are actually a lot more reluctant to recommend financial products to friends. My suspicion is that this is because that they own a lot more assets than you know, millennials would own, and so they have a lot more risk if they go with the wrong product. As well as that they're not really our audience as well. So we're, you know, we had a risk profile that was more targeted to people with a long investment horizon. And as well as this, you know, they sort of lived through the GFC and sort of understood, you know, what the risks are for investing in something that you don't really understand. So I think there was a lot more friction trying to get customers over the age of 40 to recommend to friends, whereas millennials were much more open to it. So what did this actually tell me about my business and how can I acquire customers? So this told me that one, social media advertising would work really well for this particular customer segment. And two, referral programs would also be a viable option to get customers as well. So we also asked, you know, how do we help? Like, why were you interested in Spaceship in the first place? And they said, you know, well, you invest in companies that I believe in and understand, and you give me more transparency over my portfolio. And this was quite helpful as well in understanding, you know, what are the value props I want to make sure I get across in my messaging. Cool. And so then once you've sort of come up with customer persona, a lot of the questions I get asked is, you know, how do I actually execute on these ideas and decide, you know, what channels work for my business? So I think, like, I tried getting rid of this slide because I know my talk's going to go over, but I've tried getting rid of this slide so many times. I just can't, you know, I was like, I have to sort of talk through it. But I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the Lean framework, which is the idea of having an MVP. So the idea of having MVP is just like having a minimum viable product that you can start testing with. I guess like it's a little bit, the trend is a little bit different now. Now people are like, you still need a decent product, but just don't spend too much testing ideas. And I'll give you a sort of like an example of what we mean. So you come up with an idea, you build like your MVP, you measure like how did that work out for us, and then you look at the data and you learn from that, and you use your learnings to feed into your next idea. So it's about like accelerating the cycle of learning. And I think when I say MVP, the first company I started was when I was 19, and it was, the general idea was you'd connect home chefs with the consumer. So, you know, if you're cooking 4 portions of spaghetti at home, cooking an extra portion is extremely low marginal cost, extremely low marginal effort, but you could probably sell it off for like $7, $9, and you could probably recuperate the cost of your ingredients or even make a small profit. So that was a general idea. And to test that idea, I actually spent, you know, like a whole week in the uni kitchen just cooking up like 60 portions of spaghetti per night to see if people would, you know, buy that for $7. Would people pay $3 for delivery, pick up from a central location, or pick up from someone else's house? And I did sort of like all this testing without any technical platform. So I just advertised it on UNSW Free Food Society. You know, I collected all the data on an Excel sheet, and I didn't have to build anything to test this idea. And that's sort of the ideal way to have like an MVP product. Further down the line, you'll notice that you might need more tech resources to start testing like product features and things like that. But in general, like what you're aiming for is the quickest and easiest way to test an idea before you invest a lot of money into it. So for example, in that case, I found out a lot of people were willing to pay for delivery. And in that case, then, you know, when I'm building out the product, I would include a delivery feature and not only pick up. And then the most important thing is testing and tracking your growth funnel. So this is a picture of Mixpanel, which is integrated with Segment at the time. So Mixpanel is a data visualization tool. There's a cheap version which is completely free, but the only downside for the free version is that they only take out like a sample of your users and give you like the average of that sample. So in this case, that was the tool called Hotjar. But in this case, like what I was tracking here was, what is the drop off for, sending an email to someone to roll over their super into Spaceship. And then it was like each form, like I wanted to track, where people were dropping off. And I noticed there was a massive drop off in the form in which I asked for their tax file number. Like I've worked in fintech for like 5-6 years now, and honestly, I still don't know where my tax file number is, and I have like a hard time finding it always. So we had a lot of drop-offs at that stage. And if you're not tracking it, you might see like the start and the finish, and you're like, okay, well, 80% of users are dropping off and I don't know why. Whereas if you're tracking every single step of the way, then what you can eventually see is you're like, okay, they're dropping off on this form, and you can pinpoint exactly what part of that form is causing them to drop off or what stage of the process is. And in this case, like when I found out that, hey, a lot of people dropping off at the tax file number stage, what we ended up doing was we included like a little info bubble to say, hey, you can find your tax file number by calling the ATO on this number, or alternatively, you could check your latest pay slip. And then also if you close the tab on this page, we'd send you a follow-up email to say, hey, here's where you left off. And also you can find your tax file number through these certain channels. And then just by implementing that, we were able to increase conversion on that form by 30%. So I think, just being able to track and see where everything is, like, will help you out a lot in terms of improving conversions. Cool. And now the fun part, which is customer acquisition strategies. So just to quickly summarize this, what this is trying to say is, there are a bunch of channels, which I'll go through in the next slide. But ideally, what you want to do is you want to pick out, it says 3 here, but I recommend like 1 to 2 channels max, and just like do it really well. So for a bunch of different businesses, you'll have different channels that will work from you. So here are 19, it's a non-exhaustive list, but covers probably like the majority of the ones that you will face. It won't fit every single business model. So, if you're a B2B company, you're not considering all of these. You're probably just considering the ones that work for you. So the first one's viral marketing, and I'll go through a Spaceship case study of viral marketing. So this is when you incentivize your customers to refer other customers. So popular examples of this is Uber's, like get 20, give 20. So if, you invite a friend who uses Uber for the first time, you'll get $20 in credit and I'll get $20 in credit. I think the key point of this particular strategy is that you really want to try to aim for, you only give the benefit at the activation stage, which is the stage in which they experience the core value of your product for the first time. So you want to, link that up with activation. And then ideally you want a referral strategy that also improves retention. So in Uber's case, because they're giving you $20 in credit, you're more likely to continue using Uber for a longer period of time than if you had not received that incentive. So that's a good example. I guess like word of mouth is another example of viral marketing. But one that I think is like quite underrated and really good for some types of technology products is what YouTube did. And what YouTube did was they had an embedded, viral YouTube player that we all recognize now that was just so easy to share on your own website or blog. So even a novice blogger like me on Blogspot back in the days, I was able to implement, like put in a YouTube video onto my blog, and then automatically people on my blog can start watching it immediately. And then now it's like auto-played on Facebook and auto-played on basically every single social media site that you can find. So I think that was an interesting viral technique that people don't usually consider, which is embedding. Second is targeting blogs. So I think this is when you have an audience that reads a specific blog, and then you might want to do a guest post, or you might want to get that author to guest post on yours. But basically it's to sort of target a very specific audience. Publicity is PR. So I'm sure you all know what it is. So it's like news outlets, magazines, TV. Unconventional PR is when you do a publicity stunt. So this is not a sustainable channel, but it works quite well if your brand is unheard of, and you might want to just get something to kick off and start the momentum for you. Search engine marketing is when you're placing ads on search engines. So this is particularly good for high intent search businesses. So for example, if you're a tradie and you offer plumbing services in Blacktown, a lot of people who look for those specific tradies would just Google it, because no one's really, I guess, loyal to a specific tradie. So they'd probably be looking up, I guess like best plumbing service providers in Blacktown. And then you want to make sure that you're ranking for those posts. So then a good hack to do is just to have an ad word which puts you above all the organic searches. So that's an example of search engine marketing. So really good for high intent search businesses. Social and display ads. So that's just your Facebook, Instagram ads, social media ads, and also display ads on other websites. And when you notice there are certain ads that just basically follow you across websites, that's basically what it is. Offline ads, newspaper, billboards, direct mail. So I've got an example of this in my next few slides. The search engine optimization. So it's when you use keywords or content in the form of like landing pages or blogs usually to attract traffic to your website. So it's just making sure that Google can rank you for the keywords that people usually search for your business. Again, this is good for high intent search businesses where, you know, people are looking for a product like yours and you just want to present them the solution. Content marketing. So that's when you write blogs and articles to gain a loyal following. So this takes up a little bit more time. Email marketing is when you send emails. Engineering is marketing. I've got a case study for this as well, where you make useful tools that expose customers to you. Business development is when you're making beneficial partnerships with other people. Sales is sales. I don't think I need to explain that one. Affiliate programs, I think, is when you pay a person or company to get sales or leads. I guess the most popular example is Instagram influencers. But yes, it's a great way. So I always believe that you can either, you know, create your own audience or you can leverage someone else's. And usually it's a lot more beneficial to leverage someone else's brand or network that they've already created. So that's what affiliate programs are really good for. Existing platforms is your organic social media or your earned audience. Trade shows when you have a physical product that you want to start selling to people who want to buy it. Offline events is your, you know, conferences and things that you might need to go to. So this is particularly good for B2B enterprise companies when they're targeting, you know, for example, like a decision maker that would attend this type of conference. Speaking engagements works really well for us, but it's basically to get your, have a longer form ability to explain what your product does to an audience. But again, like, you want that audience to be very specific. Community building is when you invest in connections among your customers. So these are your forums and things that help other customers engage more with your product. Cool. So Spaceship's viral waitlist. So again, for Spaceship, we started with no customers and we actually had no product in market. So all I could really do was build out a waitlist, and I actually ended up building this waitlist to 40,000 people. And then that converted into $100 million in funds under management in my first 4 months in the role. Off the back of that, we were then able to raise a whole bunch of money off lots of really cool investors like Sequoia Capital, NEA, Valar Ventures, which is Peter Thiel's one, and Horizons. And in Australia, we also raised off Airtree and Grok. So, you know, after that, we were able to launch a second product. So, you know, it sort of painted the way for us to sort of get into the market of investing and, you know, get our own license for a lot of things as well. So viral waitlist actually worked really well for us. So I started by asking you to enter your email address to get early access. Then I said, hey, you're in group 36 of the waitlist. If you want to get bumped up 10 groups, then just fill out the rest of the form. So this included verifying your mobile. And we had around 66% conversion on this landing page, which was awesome. And this also let us know that you're a unique individual. So we're not just creating 40,000 people who are, you know, multiple people just spamming, you know, the same email, for example. So it helped us, you know, verify every unique individual. And then you were in group 26. So we said, hey, if you spread the word for us, and we'll bump you up 5 groups for every person that joins using your link. So basically, if you referred 5 people, we'd bump you up into group 1. And then we also put a bunch of social proof there to say that, hey, it's not weird to share about Spaceship. A lot of people are talking about us already. And we also had, you know, easy share buttons. We also made it easy for you to get back to your link by sending you an email that followed up straight away. And what I really wanted to say about this and marketing in general is that there's nothing new. So as we evolved as humans, our brain hasn't evolved over the past couple of decades. Like, we still think exactly the same. And I think all you really do is you convert existing consumer psychology into a digital platform to benefit from, you know, distribution and virality and things like that. I think nothing that I did was particularly new from a consumer psychology perspective. All I did was put it onto the newest piece of technology, which in this case was, you know, a website that made it easy to share. So I think in this case, what you want to think about is, okay, well, what existing consumer psychology and rules of thumb and heuristics would work really well for my business? So just as an example, a couple of decades ago, people were sending, you know, from letterbox to letterbox, you know, hey, sign this and, you know, you'll be prosperous in the future. And, this would just get continuously passed. And this gained, what we would now call virality. And then a couple of decades after that, we had this thing called MSN, which I'm sure a lot of you remember, where, I would get messages all the time that said, hey, send this message to 7 people, otherwise you'll be ugly for the rest of your life. And, those sort of messages have always been relatively viral. And all I really did was I just translated the same thing that people acted upon for the past, decades, and just put it into a digital platform. So I think that works really well. And I think that's a good way to think about it. But what you really want to do is you want to also build up some momentum for your business. So I'd be lying if I said that all I did was run this wait list and it became vastly successful. I also invested in a bunch of other campaigns to feed into it. So I think, acquiring customers and building trust is very similar to how you would do it with a real human. You're not unlikely to, switch over tens of thousands of dollars of your superannuation from just seeing one ad. You probably want to talk about it with a friend or see some familiar faces supporting this as well. So for us, the tech community looks up to, Mike Brooks and Jane Liu. And so we ran some ads with their face on it and just said, your super's invested like you're retiring in 5 years. We also included like the logos of the companies we're invested in, so that creates like some level of brand familiarity as well. Also ran Astronauts of the Day campaign. So people would see their friends and they'd retweet this tweet that I'd sent out on this, on a planet basically that I photoshopped onto them. And then they'd share it with their Twitter network, and then everyone following them would see that and associate their brand with our brand. Very similarly, we had this tool called Intercom, and if you'd signed up with the same email, Intercom would know that, how many Twitter followers you had. And I by no means judge people based on the number of Twitter followers they have, but it was really useful. So I could just find like people with over 5,000 followers. I'd send them free merch, handwrite them a note that said, hey, please follow us. Please tweet this at us. And then they'd tweet the merch at us, and then we'd basically get free impressions of over 5,000 just from running this campaign. And it was also like very high quality impressions as well. It's like people who know who he is and they see that he's supporting this brand as well. We also wrote blogs to have like thought leadership. We applied for a bunch of awards in startup industry, and in the bottom photo you can see that we also ran talks for influencers within the tech space to speak to our audience. So this was particularly useful because in technology, like I'm in marketing, I consider myself working in tech. There's people who are developers, like designers, product managers, CEOs who also consider themselves in tech. So it's like, how can I target each of those niche audiences all at once? So basically we just got like a thought leader. I hate using the term, but it is what it is. A thought leader to come talk, and then they'd bring in their own audience. So Jane Lube was able to bring in an audience of around 400 people, just like female founders. And then we were able to sort of basically pitch Spaceship's product to those people and then target that specific niche in the tech audience. So I think segmentation works really well for delivering returns as well. Cool. And then we've got HubSpot, which is an engineering as marketing example. So really good for B2B. So they basically ran this website grader that said, how strong is your website? You put in your website URL and your email. And then between 2006 and 2011, HubSpot's free website grader graded more than 4 million websites. And it was really good for their prospective customers because it helped them understand that, which sites weren't performing well. And then so they made like the idea of using HubSpot a lot more attractive, and also functioned like a free automated consultation service for HubSpot as well. So they never needed to, hire more people to run this. They didn't need to invest any more money into, letting this run. So basically it just got like 4 million leads for their sales team for free after they've started running this. So that worked extremely well for them. I suspect Rebecca's here because I've gone over time.
Well, just that was awesome. Thank you, Anna. We are going to, if you were madly taking notes through that, I just wanted to let you know that we are going to create a takeaway sheet with kind of the highlights of what Anna has spoken about, and we will email it to you all in the next few days. Also, you'll be able to watch a video of this event, which will be up on the link that we've already shared on chat, probably towards the end of this week. So we're now going to bring on 3 case study businesses. So we've got Michael, Zoltan, and Stephanie, who all have different questions related to what you've asked, what you've just spoken about, and how this relates to their business. And then we're going to go to questions as well. There are heaps of questions coming through. I think we're possibly going to run slightly over today, and any questions that we don't get to, we will try and address in the takeaway sheet as well. So I just want to introduce Michael first from Bagel, a much loved Sydney retail brand. Can you just share briefly about your business, how COVID's affected you? And you've got 2 questions for Anna. You can just say the 2 questions at the same time as well, so we can go through them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm Michael Schaffer, and I own Brooklyn Boy Bagels. We're an artisan bakery based in Marrickville, and we specialize in doing authentic New York bagels and other baked goods. I don't know if it takes much more explanation besides that. We've been around for about 7.5 years, and like everybody else, we were affected during COVID. We lost about 70% of our business when COVID first struck, and that kind of put us into action mode. So we had to do a lot of pivoting. One of the first things we did is we launched a website, a Shopify website, and started selling direct to customers, and doing direct to home deliveries, because that's where people were still available to sell to. And we did a bunch of other pivots as well, including opening a drive-through in our bakery in Marrickville, getting into the supermarket business. And since then we've been opening up in a lot of markets, because people are spending a lot more time in farmers markets now than they were before COVID. So we're and now I've got a pop up in Bondi that I just launched as like a mobile cart. So we're becoming very mobile and nimble with what we're doing, and as a result, actually we're now on track to actually have our best year on on record, ironically, in the year of COVID. I guess Anna. So I guess one of the questions is, we launched the Shopify website. I basically spent about a week learning Shopify and designing it myself and opening it up. And so when COVID first hit, we actually had quite a lot of business. And then as we've been pivoting, we've been spending more and more time, on other parts of the business. And as it's been happening, the customer retention has been going, down and down over time. So I guess I'd be curious to see what your, thoughts and ideas of things that we should be doing to basically, get those customers coming back. And probably what you're saying before, probably part of that would be probably maybe monitoring part of their journeys through the e-commerce site. And I guess, we have a complicated business. So also I'm a former journalist. I'm very, very good at the PR side of business. And we're just about to start looking at what we should be doing in terms of a proper EDM campaign strategy as well. We have both retail customers, and we have wholesale cafes and supermarkets that we sell to. So it's a bit complicated. We have a kind of a diverse customer base, and just sort of, just trying to look at ways that we should be, using growth marketing to sort of, keep shoring up those parts of the business.
Yeah. So I guess just almost summarize both of the questions is one, how do I bring, more retail customers to my business? And then 2 is also how do I bring customers to my online store as well? So I'll just start off with the retail one. So I think, mass distribution, discoverability, and virality, and all the basically good stuffs of marketing on online channels is not just limited to high growth tech products. So again, I think, you can either build up your own audience, or you can leverage other people's audiences. And it's usually easier to leverage other people's audiences just because they already have that trust with the brand. So I think when it comes to boosting customers for your retail business, you can use Instagram influencers or food bloggers, which go under what I was explaining before about affiliate marketing. And in that case, you leverage the brand and the trust that they've already built with their audience to build up your own brand. And I think, for example, I know that you have vegan products. So if you wanted to, advertise more to the vegan community, then you can just find micro influencers or bloggers that, people know have that special dietary requirement, and you can advertise your product through them since they already have a niche following of, vegan followers. And then if you don't want to find these influencers organically, there are 2 services you can use for it. There's Tribe or Vamp, and they're just marketplaces that help brands connect with influencers. Mm-hmm. Another one you could do, which I think you actually do really well because I Googled it beforehand, but you can also try Googling relevant search queries like best bagels in Sydney and contact the authors of the blogs, such as Concrete Playground, your Broadsheet, and ask if they could include you on the list as well. And so that works really well. Alternatively, if you want to over time build out your own audience, I actually recently read in this book called No Filter about Instagram that in Japan, there's actually a word for Instagrammable design called Brighte, which is like basically the more Brighte it is, whether it's an outfit or, in your case, a bagel, the most socially and commercially successful that it has the potential to be. So you'll notice that, business brands that really want to leverage our attention from, whether it's hotels or restaurants or even large consumer brands, they change the way that they design their space and market their products to adjust to strategies that actually cater to the visual way we communicate now, which is, cringy enough as it is, but, it's becoming Instagram worthy. So, for example, some libraries in San Fran now, rather than arranging their books by title and author, they actually do it by cover color, which is a decision that only really, makes sense when you prioritize Instagram aesthetics over color, over book discovery. And then similarly, there's like a widely popular burger chain founded in Manhattan called Black Tap. And then they create like indulgent milkshakes with like entire slices of cake on the top for months, and then customers lined up around the block to purchase them. And then they don't even finish them anyway because they're too big. But either way, it was Instagram worthy and worth sharing on Instagram.
Yeah,
so
also known as Franklin food sometimes.
Yeah, it's just a massively good opportunity to just like share those really cool like food trends and go viral just from people organically sharing it. This, the last example doesn't even cost you any money. And then whereas online, I think you can do all of the above to also boost your online traffic, but then I think there's also a way to build momentum and get the most out of every single campaign you do. So something I would probably do to, reboost your online presence is I'd probably run a campaign or promo that reaches all your existing customers that have like ordered from you online before. So you can do this by reaching out to your entire mailing list or also advertising it on your social media. So this could be in the form of like a discount or a limited edition product for Christmas, but basically anything that would get them to order from you again. And then for every order that basically comes in, you can handwrite a note that personally thanks them for supporting your business, but it also offers them like a discount code that expires in 2 weeks that they can give to friends, or they can use it themselves as well. So in this case, it would help you retain those customers, because now, again, like the principle I was talking before is like you want to retain customers. So they will order from you again because now they've got a discount code that encourages them to do so. Then also encourage to share with their friends, because now they've got this, really special promo that only applies to them, and they'll feel really cool sharing it with their friends and making sure that their friends benefit from it as well. So this helps with like social proof, it helps with virality, and it also puts in like the urgency, like, hey, we need these orders in the next 2 weeks, otherwise your code will expire. So there's also a time limit to when they can use it. And I think that could be a successful way to, get traffic back to your website through organic referrals.
Nice.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anna. And I'm going to now introduce Zoltan, who has a really cool business called Citizen Wolf, who some of you may have heard of. I'll let Zoltan describe his business. It's both a tech business and a sustainability business. And you have a couple of questions for Anna as well. And a reminder, please keep the questions coming in. I can see heaps of questions there, which is awesome.
All right. Thanks, Rebecca. My name's Zoltan. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here. And thanks to Anna for all the insights that she's shared so far. I've definitely got a few questions. I think my questions have changed slightly based on the presentation. But for those who don't know, Citizen Wolf basically is re-engineering the way clothes are made at scale to be both carbon negative, because the planet sorely needs it, but also custom fit, because fashion in itself is both destructive but super frustrating. And we've all had the experience of buying things online or in store that don't particularly fit or don't fit in the exact right spots. And so we began about 4.5 years ago, really with a simple question, which is, why is it so hard to find clothes that fit everybody? So T-shirts are our proof of concept, unlike probably the expected answer, which would be, let's go and make fancy suits. We decided not to do that because we didn't think we could add anything to that particular part of the industry. And also, people don't wear suits like they used to. And in fact, the clothes that we wear the majority of the time didn't seem to get any of the benefit of quote unquote tailoring. So to do that effectively online, we knew we had to do something differently. So we created what we call the Magic Fit algorithm, which basically replaces the measuring tape with mathematics. All we need is your height, weight, age, and for women, also bra. And from those 4 data points, we can basically make a mathematical model of your body that's approximately 94% accurate. We build the garment off that. Everything's made here in Sydney. And because we make on demand, nothing goes to landfill, and we produce 48% less carbon than the traditional industry does. Then we go one step further and 5x the offsets to make sure that everything is carbon negative. So my question to Anna is basically two things. One is value prop. We started trying to solve this fit problem, but then we did some customer research a while back, and it became apparent that it was actually the sustainability creds of our business that were equally, if not more, attractive to our customers. So we decided to kind of pivot all of our marketing comms into that. We did new photo shoots that were much more about like nature and outdoors and green and stuff. And then we ran the ads, and the thing is, the ad that kept performing again and again and again was actually the magic fit one. It was the technology message and the like, get your perfect fit. So I guess my question is, like, where do we go from here? Because we've got one thing where our customers are telling us something, and then we've got the data which says actually it's the fit message. And then my subsequent question is about basically online acquisition, channel mixes, and you said choose 2 channels basically and just do those well and don't worry about anything else, which probably answers the question. But I guess the corollary to that is, should we be profitable on the first order? Because we have some debate internally as to whether we do. It's obviously it's different if you're selling mattresses, right? It's pretty important that you're profitable on the first order, but we sell T-shirts, and T-shirts are an evergreen product. I can sell you one today, and I'll hopefully be able to sell you one next year as a result. So because we have quite a high frequency, I guess, of purchase, and also a high lifetime value, my question is, do we need to be profitable on that first order?
Yeah.
Thanks.
For your first question, so which value proposition? So I think listen to the data. I think from my understanding of your business, it sounds like the product is the custom fit T-shirts, and the fact that it's ethically produced is a feature. So what I think what this means to me is that the value proposition is, it's a custom fit T-shirt, and then like the way to convert them is just also mention, hey, it's also like produced ethically. I think actually, like, I checked out your website. I think the way that you've communicated on your website is actually quite good. There are like a couple of fun value props you can do, which is like custom fit T-shirts made ethically, or fit for you and fit for the planet. I think like being able to convey both messages, like the way that you've already done on your website, actually works quite well. Just go with the ads that perform the best. So if your ads are telling you that like custom fit T-shirt sells better, I assume that would probably sell better when you're running ads generally. So when your ads, at ad set stage, that's when you should be testing your audience. So imagine to a general audience where you haven't done any specific, targeting for like ethical audience, like people who are interested in ethical companies versus just like a normal audience. I imagine a normal audience would respond to like the fit value proposition a lot better than the ethical one. Whereas if you're targeting like an ethical interest on Facebook, then you would probably notice that your ethical one might actually do better. So again, I think it's based on like audience targeting. But on your website, since it's a little bit more general, I think, the focus should be on the custom fit T-shirts, but then also do make the mention that it's ethical. I think you can do both, but then when it comes to ads, it's like you should make it more specific based on the customer that you're targeting on the ad. As for your second question, do I need to be profitable? I think like it really depends on the business model. So for most people, it's like really dependent on the business model. So if you're on e-commerce, I think you should aim to be profitable. The reason for this is because it's not really like a SaaS product like Atlassian, and e-commerce is not as sticky. So for example, Atlassian often have like a subscription model where that month on month they're going to be paying you. It also requires their customers to invest heavily in setting up the company profile on Atlassian. So that means that their customers are unlikely to switch products in the short term. And if anything, over time, they're probably going to be upsold into other Atlassian products. So you notice that they have a really high customer lifetime value. Contrarily, customers of e-commerce brands, they don't tend to have the same brand loyalty. So like their first order might also be their last order, and it's really hard to guess which ones they are. So in this case, when you're running paid acquisition campaigns, I think you should ensure that cost per acquisition is lower than customer lifetime value. So you can figure out like customer lifetime value by just calculating, what's the you multiply, what's the average order value by the purchase frequency, and then you'll come out with a customer lifetime value. And you shouldn't be spending more than the customer lifetime value to actually acquire the customer. And in that sense, like you should, shut off all campaigns that are more expensive than that. I think at the beginning, it's okay if that's not the case. So if cost per acquisition is more than customer lifetime value, that's okay at the beginning because you're still learning. Even the Facebook algorithm is still learning. So it's okay to, spend more money testing, but just make sure that over time you should be able to optimize and tweak it so that it is eventually lower than customer lifetime value. And if you're thinking of like, oh, well, how do I, lower the cost of acquisition? How do I do this like optimization that you're talking about? Then I think, again, it comes to segmentation. So how do I target the audience I'm actually looking for? So at ad set level, again, you should be continuously testing the audience of your ads. The cheapest to acquire is probably if you run retargeting ads that target people who have previously visited your site. So you probably notice this, like, sometimes you click on, like, well, for me anyway, I click on like a dress that I like, and then it stalks me around the internet until I finally cave and I just splurge on the dress. So like they're the sort of ads that actually work really well conversion. Like you spent the money to hit them with brand awareness ads, and now when you're running retargeting, it's more about, okay, well, I'm going to convert them for a lower cost. So you're not losing out completely if they don't convert the first time. And then the second thing you should do that would also improve your ad conversion is if you create like a custom lookalike audience. So you just upload a database full of emails of your existing audience, and then you upload them to Facebook. Facebook will find similar people, whether it's interest or demographic, and then they will start advertising to those people. So that works quite well as well. And I think if you were going to turn this into a campaign, I'd run it over 4 weeks. But the first one I'd run is a brand awareness campaign where I'd do like the made for fit value prop, or if you're targeting a specific ethical audience, and ethical. Second one can be the alternative, so like ethical or made to fit. And then you start retargeting them with like social proof ads. So like, oh, like we have really good reviews. And then if they haven't converted yet, then wait 7 days and hit them with a discount ad. So it's like, okay, well, you've heard about us 3 times now, you still haven't converted. We're going to give you this discount code of like 20% that you can use in the next 2 weeks. And if they still don't convert, then you stop sending them ads because they're probably not going to.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. I'm going to now introduce Stephanie from Beam Australia. I came across Stephanie myself a few years ago when I was looking to hire my first part-time employee. So Beam Australia is a platform for people who want to work flexibly or part-time, and companies that want to recruit part-time employees. I will hand to Steph to introduce her company, and she has a couple of questions specifically for B2B businesses. And then we'll come to questions from you.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Thanks, Anna, and everyone for having me. I know we're nearly at time, so there'll be people who need to drop off, but I'm super excited to ask these questions. So as Rebecca said, we specialise in flexible work. So we have our jobs and talent platform. We provide advice as well, which has been probably the biggest thing over this COVID period in terms of helping businesses to think about how they manage flexible workforces in a work from home or hybrid model, that kind of thing. But we're just about to launch our third product, which is a SaaS product, so software as a service. And I have a couple of questions about that. So, and because we haven't run that sort of model before. So as you think about selling to businesses, enterprise or small, medium-sized businesses, what kind of channels do they want to engage in? So is it, events or LinkedIn or PR and media? So is there a particular marketing mix that you'd suggest for that audience?
I think like in terms of finding which businesses, I think it's best to start with like verticals first, just because a lot of the times like businesses become a little bit more competitive. So it's like, I don't want my competitor advertising for good talent on this channel if I'm not doing it. So I think try starting in like a similar vertical and then slowly expanding to other verticals. And then when it comes to like how to find them, I think with a product like yours, businesses only really find it relevant when they're actually hiring for people. So you should start, and then you should only start marketing to them when they are hiring. So I think a good way to find businesses that you should be targeting would be on like LinkedIn or Seek, and then contacting them through those channels. Or like alternatively, like if you're looking at businesses that are a little bit more like, startup-y, but still like, well along their way, then you can try to see funding news. So for example, check like Sydney Morning Herald or like Business Insider or whatever to see, which sort of companies are actually receiving funding, because most likely in the case is that, after they've done like their funding round, they're going to use that money to hire. So that's a good way to start targeting businesses that hire. And then I think you'd notice that a lot of B2B companies are very sales-led in terms of growth. And this is because companies that don't have a brand yet, they need to spend a lot of time building trust. So if you think about it, with B2B businesses, like the person paying for the product is not necessarily the person who uses the product. So you often need to make it as easy as possible for the person using the product to convince the person who pays for the product that it's a worthy investment. So for established companies like, Slack and Atlassian, it's actually quite easy for users to use social proof to convince the person paying. But for new companies, you need to spend a lot more time not just selling it to the user, but actually helping the user become an advocate for your company so that you can actually close the deal at the end of the day. So I think, again, like check, the businesses that are currently hiring and then reach out to them and start off with sales. And then I think over time when you're going to scale your business, when, sales is too, cost intensive and time intensive, then you think about like, how do I scale this digitally? And usually it starts with like scaling parts of onboarding. And then in terms of what's a good channel for more like inbound sales and growth, then I reckon PR media works quite well, as well as like events and stuff like that. So like just being in the room with like people who are decision makers, so like the person who owns the business or the people in the, like head of HR, those sort of areas work quite well as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Yeah. So our new product is around designing teams and work and allocating work most efficiently. So I guess it's a new kind of, it's new to market, but I'm particularly interested in how small and medium-sized businesses like to buy, because the less like in-person sales we do, the lower we can keep the cost.
Yeah.
Then.
Yes. Yeah, I actually work for a similar business with a similar audience to you, which is why I've already thought of these questions a long time before. You can help existing small businesses hiring for remote workers by just like you can promote like the ones that the positions they're already hiring for. So even if there's a business that's not affiliated with you, I would put that on your marketplace and just help them sort of get the word out. So it creates like social proof for your competitor companies. Also creates like early traction from the demand side so that you can leverage that to bring other companies on board. So for example, you can say like, okay, well, I've got, like all these businesses within your industry, or some of them even competitors from yours, and I'm seeing, 30,000 people go onto my marketplace to find jobs that are remote. And it's like, well, if you want to be a part of that action, then you should probably sign up with us as well. And then you should have like the onboarding, like the self-serve sign up. And then that's also a good way to start contacting those businesses as well who are already hiring for remote jobs. So what you can do is you can say like, hey, we've actually created this profile for you on our webpage already. All you need to do is claim your business. And that's a good way to bring them on board. And all they have to do is really just like attach their name, because you've already posted it. So it's a bit manual at the beginning. Maybe you can build a bot that can automatically scrape it for you. But it's a really good way, and it's really good for SEO as well, because now you've got all these landing pages of all these businesses advertising jobs that would look up that, and your website will start ranking for those landing pages. So every time someone's like, okay, well, product manager role at Brighte, for example, that's remote, you'll start showing up for those searches as well. So it's really good for SEO, really good for like the demand side of your business, and it's really good to leverage to bring other businesses on board as well. And I think something else that I also did was I did discounts for co-working spaces, accelerators, and VCs. So I reached out to a bunch of them in like the startup community, or even co-working spaces doesn't necessarily have to be a startup, but it's like I just reached out to them and said, hey, for everyone who works in your co-working space or is part of your portfolio, they can take 20% off, the next deal that they're doing. And it's just like I just say like, oh, it's an exclusive discount for people associated with your brand only. And actually that gets a lot of traction. Like all the accelerators and stuff want it because they want to continuously add value for companies within their vicinity. So that works quite well for us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. That was packed with ideas, actually, that answer. I'll try and add as many of them as we can to the notes. We are running over time, so we're going to try and do 5 minutes rapid-fire questions, going through the questions that people have asked, and the ones that we don't get to, we will try to get to on the takeaway sheet. So is it going to have to be really, you've been very generous in sharing, but we'll try and do one-line answers to try and get through as many as we can. So number one, did you create a viral waitlist from scratch, or did you use an existing product or service?
regretfully, yes, I created it from scratch, but there are existing ones that you can just like sort of implement onto your website, and like I think there's like Referral Candy's one. There are a bunch of like Referral Candy competitors, so maybe just look up Referral Candy competitors, and there are like heaps that you can just plug in. But yeah, we built it ourselves.
Awesome, thank you. Could you please share, so Vinoth Kumar has asked, could you please share your knowledge on growth loops that product teams and influencers like Andrew Chen talk about? How do you start with growth loops?
Yeah, I think what growth loops sort of talk about is it's very similar to what I was talking about momentum. So it's like when you're building out one thing, how does it feed into the rest of your like growth cycle? So when you acquire a customer, how do you make sure that, you know, those people are going to also activate and also retain and then refer other people onwards? And it's just about building out this momentum where every time you're spending marketing dollars, you're actually able to get the most out of it. So I think so basically it's just like coming up with a really smart strategy in which you can continuously feed like your initial initiative to generate more and more growth over time. So how can you, I guess, almost like how do you make sure that it gets to the end so that they refer other people onto you?
Awesome, thank you. So how do you run growth experiments, someone's asked. So when you're talking about running experiments, is there a framework that you use in order to kind of prioritize what you should do first and how you assess whether something's likely to work?
Yeah, so I prioritize my ideas on a Google sheet that basically is called the ICE framework. So you rate every idea out of 10 in terms of impact. So what impact is it going to make on the key metric you're trying to influence? Confidence, how confident are you achieving this impact? And which is how easy is it to actually implement this particular idea? So in terms of human work hours, in terms of cost, in terms of time. So I think it's like you rank them, and then you basically the highest score out of 30, you just put at the top. And then in terms of how to run them and how long to spend on them, it really depends on the channel. Like, for example, if you're testing out SEO, you're not going to see results for the first 6 months, or but most cases, probably like 1 year, you're not going to see results. Whereas you probably expect to see immediate results when you're running like Facebook ads. Like you'd probably only, you should be able to see very clear results after around 5 days of Facebook ads. So it really depends on the channel, but it's whatever you, like whenever you see the result, if you're confident that this is the correct result, then I think just go with it. Like for example, if you have only 10 views on your website, probably all the data you're looking at is not good enough. Like it's not good data. Whereas like, if 9 out of 10 of those views all say the same thing, then maybe you can just go with that. Whereas like, if you have like 10,000 data points to work off, like a 65 to 35 would probably give you an answer as well. So just like, it's just your confidence in terms of the data you're getting.
ICE again, impact?
Impact, confidence, and ease.
I'll share that in the takeaway sheet. Monica Lee has asked, how did you get famous people like Mike Cannon-Brookes to get affiliated with your brand? Did you pay them or did you ask them for permission?
We were lucky because Mike Cannon-Brookes and Jane Liu were our angel investors. So we just asked them to get to appear on our ads. But in many cases, like I think you can just ask them. Some influencers will be like, oh, you'll need to pay me. Like if you're doing Instagram influencers you're not affiliated with. But I feel like most people, if you're like in tech or a very specific industry, they probably wouldn't mind doing it for free. So it really depends, like who it is.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I'm going to go one last question that's had lots of votes. So what's a good way to rotate your social media posts when you provide a single product or service so the audience doesn't get bored of your content?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I'm glad you asked this because my CMO at Brighte, she used to be head of social at eBay in San Fran, so she actually had worked with like millions of data points and have actually worked out a proper algorithm for social. So the correct way that you should do it is you should obviously you shouldn't be spending too much of your time doing exactly the same product post. Like no one enjoys seeing like non-stop commercial posts. So it should be 50% of your content needs to be engaging. So it could be like, memes or like fun facts or like influencer posts or something that's like engaging for the audience. 30% should be educational. So it should be teaching people about so in the case of for example, Citizen Wolf, that's right. Sorry, in the case of Citizen Wolf, like you might want to spend some time educating them about the ethical side of the business. So that like 30% should be educational, but it's like, that's like the stuff that, would help them make that decision to convert. And then 20% of the content should be commercial. So that's when you're like, okay, well, I taught you all this, like, here's all the engaging posts. Like you're friends with our brand now, and then 20% is like, okay, well, here's the solution to everything we've just showed you. So I think, being able to structure it that way works quite well. And I'm not Tim Doyle, but if you look at his businesses, you'll notice that he follows a very similar structure.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. And just to remind you again, if you would like to check out Tim Doyle's, he did specific workshop on this, which was the second workshop he gave. You can reach it via the link that we sent out earlier. That was a really informative session as well. So thank you so much, Anna. We will try and get to as many of the other questions as we can on the takeout sheet. We have run a little bit over today, but pretty much everybody has stuck around. We have an incredibly large number of people on this webinar, and everybody's still here. So hanging with me around for a few minutes earlier, for a few minutes longer. And thank you so much, Anna, for your generosity in sharing all of that information today. So I'm just going to wrap up. I want to start by thanking Anna, thanking Steph, Michael, and Zoltan for being great case studies and examples of what we've learned today. I just want to remind you that this is part of a series, and this is the last day today, but come February 22nd, we will be launching the beginning of the next series. So I'm just going to tell you about the first two events. So the first event will be on 22nd of February. It will be on developing your annual plan. So, when I'm not hosting this, I'm the founder of businesses myself. My last business was a company called Hey You, which is the coffee app some of you might use. And I remember running that business, how hard it was to put together an annual plan. And I had no idea whether I was doing it the same way as other businesses, that there must be a framework for doing this well. Catherine Ritchie is kind of the expert in business strategy. So she is ex-Macquarie Bank. She's now an incredible consultant. I saw her speak once, and it changed the way that my whole business operated. So we are bringing her to you on February 22nd, free webinar, and she will work through with you the framework for developing an effective annual business plan. Second up, 1st of March, we have the founder CEO of Employment Hero. So they have had they have grown 3 times. So 300% growth every year for the past 3 years. Now an incredibly massive business with hundreds of staff. Ben has a really particular way that he operates his business. So he's going to go through his operating strategy with you. That one is on March the 1st. We then have more webinars on capital raising, finance, with a specific event for B2B businesses. And then we have a whole third series, second in the year, which will be on how to implement a lot of what you will have learned so far. So we will be emailing this list first. Everyone who has attended one of the events so far will get an invitation to register for the events next year. So look out for that in your inbox. In the next few weeks, they will be up and live and available for registrations before Christmas. I also just wanted to let you know that you will now have been emailed a survey. We're going to share the link now in the chat as well. It would be awesome if you could fill out the survey, let us know the value that you got out of the event today, and also anything that you think we could improve on for next year. I want to thank the City of Sydney, who have put so much effort into putting these events together and putting them on for the City of Sydney business community. Thank you. This is the end of this year, and we'll be back with you next year. Thank you to Ben and the team at Norwest for your help with all the tech. And thank you to all the speakers that we've had so far. I really hope you enjoyed the webinar today. I got some great insights from Anna. I hope I can see you all again on February 22nd, and I hope that you have a relaxing and very successful Christmas period. Thanks so much.